Hey, Joe Gilder here from Home Studio Corner. 6 years ago this month, Graham Cochran from the Recording Revolution and I launched a little membership site called Dueling Mixes. 6 years and 72 mixes later, we're still going strong, and I want to give you a gift, okay? So the way Dueling Mixes works, every month, Graham Cochran and I both mix the same song. Our members get to hear both of our mixes. They actually get to vote on which mix they like the best. Then they get to watch both of our videos where we each do an overview showing you how we mix the song. It's like we dissect our mixes and show the tools and techniques and strategies we used to get the sounds that we got in our mixes. And we've been doing that every month since October 2012. So, what I wanted to do for you is to give you one of my videos from one of those months. So if you're not a Dueling Mixes member and you're not interested in it at all, or maybe you've just never bothered to check it out, here it is for you on a proverbial digital silver platter. This is from back in December 2013. We mixed this really great pop tune by the artists Scott and Brendo. One of my favorite songs we've mixed over the last 6 years, and in this video I'm going to give you my mix overview video from that mix. Now, it's several years ago, so it's several versions back of Studio One, the software that I use, but the principles are timeless. I did some crazy stuff with pitch shifting, did a lot of top-down / backwards mixing, and there's a good amount of automation in this mix. And what else? I think I used some pedal board effects to get a few of the sounds. So there's a lot going on here, and I want you to have it for free. If after watching the video you like what you see and you want to be a part of Dueling Mixes, we'd love to have you. There's a free trial available. Just head over to duelingmixes.com. All right, that's it for me. Enjoy the video. Hey there, welcome to my video for Dueling Mixes for the month of December 2013. If this is your first month, welcome. If this is your, 14th month, welcome. Glad you're still sticking around. This is a great song. It's just if you haven't listened to the tracks, I imagine you have. It's a lot of fun to mix, and it's pretty different from stuff that I normally do and stuff that I feel like we normally do here in Dueling Mixes. Lots of cool stuff. So it's definitely got a pop vibe, got some rap stuff going on, just a lot of cool things. When we first heard this track, I told Graham, we both said, yeah, we definitely need to do this one. A, because I just wanted to mix it, and B, it's just a fun song. If you're not bobbing your head by the time you're getting close to the end of the mix, something's wrong. It's a fun song. So without jumping in further, if you haven't heard the song yet or just want to refresh your memory of what it sounds like and what specifically my mix sounds like, I'm going to play a little snippet for you. We'll go through the first chorus, and then I'll stop and I'll show you all some pretty cool tricks that I used in this mix. A lot of cool stuff. I've got a whole list of things I want to cover with you. So before that, let's take ourselves a listen. Helps if it's not muted. Let's try that again.
Okay, kids, let's go. Pocketing the light, and I'm keeping it from drifting. And even though I'm knowing better, I'll be wishing that every day, every dog day, every last sight is a time that'll last for life, yo. And I don't mind if you stop by when you got time, and I'll take you on a ride through a rainbow sky. It's me, it's you, and it's every bit of truth. So take it all in as we make it all new. Fighting to the finish of the last warm breeze. On the knees in the tall grass and green trees. If you need me, you can find me in the longest beam. One afternoon to sum up every dream. Now that's the spirit. Go get 'em, Tiger.
I don't have to know where I'm going now. Following the road, reverie bound. All I need is you. Where I'm going now. All I need is you. Reverie bound.
Next round. We catch a last.
Okay. All right. So first off, you heard a few clicks. That's just my poor computer. It's having a hard time on this mix. So let me just adjust the buffer up. See if that helps anything. Yoink. I've got a fair amount of effects and automation going on in this mix, and it's just a lot of tracks. So between my hard drive and my 4-year-old computer that I think is starting to want to die on me, which It'll be a sad day. It's bogging me down just a little bit. So just so you know, I mean, I've got currently at the shooting of this video, this is at least a 3 or 4 year old iMac, and it still can do this session that has 50 plus tracks. I think it still works. There's a couple little pops there, mainly just to be honest with you, that didn't have any pops while I was mixing this. It's just shooting a video and actually recording video while I'm doing running the mix. That's what's really bogging it down. So don't feel like you're gonna just destroy your computer with this mix. It's actually not that bad, especially because of the quality of the tracks. These were done in a home studio, and as far as I know, a lot of the sounds came from Logic and from obviously recording as well. But it just shows when you go and listen to these, one thing you'll note is a lot of the sounds that we're getting, especially on things like drums, are just the tracks themselves. They chose good samples. They layered them well to where it sounded like I wanted it to sound before I did anything. So, for example, looking at the drums over here, I ran the kick drums together and did a little EQ to get just a little bit of that 200 hertz resonance out. What else did I do on the drums? I didn't do much at all. I did a fair amount to this full kit that they had, and I'll show you that in a minute. EQ'd the hi-hat a little bit. That's it. Look at all these drum tracks here with no processing on them. And then just to be fair, look at the drum bus way over here where I keep all my buses. You'll see I've got an EQ with a little boost in the low end just because it was feeling a little thin. That's all I did. So don't be afraid to not do stuff on your mixes. Okay, so that was just a quick point I wanted to make. A quick overview if you've never seen me mix before. All my tracks are over here on the left, and I'm going to narrow them down so we can see them a little better. And then I run everything through a subgroup, which I put over to the right of my mix window. So I've got, as you can see down here, I've got drums, percussion, bass, acoustic, keys, the effects tracks that they had, and then each of the vocals, and then the background vocals, the whoa vocals. Actually, I'm going to call it that. That's what I've got it labeled elsewhere, together here with a reverb track over here. Okay, so everything I have is running through here, and just makes life a lot easier for me. I'm really digging this. If you've been a member for a while, you've seen me do this quite a bit. Okay, so where to start with this song? There's really just so much good stuff going on here, and then there's a lot in the track. So they did a lot like last month, a lot of doubled parts and a lot of stereo parts. So you've got acoustic guitar is pretty prominent. Obviously, there's a lot of vocals, and then you've also got these different synth keyboard tracks here. I've got them all bussed to my keys bus, but as you can see, there's a lot here, and they're all in stereo. If we dial that back, you can see that a little better. Okay, that's just adjusting the view, that I'm not changing the volume. So you can see just about everything is in stereo. And when you have this many stereo tracks, you can and usually will have some issues. So one of the things I did and wanted to show you was I created my own mono button and turned a lot of these into mono. So if you'll focus your attention over here on the left side of the screen, this is just going to show plugins on a track-by-track basis. Anytime you see this binaural pan plugin, it's this right here. It's literally a plugin that allows me to take a stereo track and adjust the width or pan the entire stereo image left and right, just kind of as a separate plugin as opposed to just the single panner here. But it has a nifty little mono button. So I wanted to make some of these mono. I wasn't sure which one, so I put this plugin on most of them and just played around with it. So anywhere where you see, and I'll show you in the mix window, anywhere where you see that binaural pan plugin in this mix, that means I've turned that track into mono. So as you can see here, all of our synths are here. The ones that are melodic are over here in kind of this peach color, and then the ones that are more pad stuff are over here in purple. That one's yellow because I created it later. But as you can see, of these 10, 12 tracks, almost all of them are in mono because there's just so much happening in the stereo field. If you have 10 stereo tracks, it starts to all sound mono anyway, and you don't get any width to them. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So for example, these bells here. Let's go find a spot where these bells are playing. The Disney bells and whistles. They're playing throughout most of the choruses. So let's go there. So what I did, here is it just panned to the center, and as it is when you open the track. So most of the sound is in the middle, and you've got this whistle and this bell thing going on. And that's great. but I just wanted to pan it off to the side. Now, in Studio One and most things, if you just pan it to the left, it just plays for you the left track. As you can hear here, watch this. And pan to the right. It tends to lose something there. So I set it to mono so that all the sound is going over to the left. I wanted to find a track that I could pair this up with and have one be left and one be right. So I made it mono. Now that it's mono with this binaural pan plugin, I can pan it over to the left. And then I found another part, this piano part, made it mono and panned it to the right. See, they're playing the same part. It makes sense that they would complement each other left and right. They're also singing along with the vocalist, so it's going to be a little buried in the mix anyway, so I didn't want more stereo field there to mess things up. You just hear it tickle in your left ear, especially those bells as they come through. And then same thing with these tracks. They're doing the same sort of thing. And these are low level. They're not creating much in the track itself. You could probably mute them and get away with it, but when I muted them, I could hear they were just a little bit missing in the thickness there and kind of that mid-range warmth of a piano. So I did that with all the tracks. And then the ones that I left in stereo were things like the bells at the chorus. Those just sounded... What's cool about this is you don't have to make all of these mono. If you do, then you're missing the point. All you have to do is just pick the ones that aren't as important. Like the ones I just showed you, they're not terribly up front in the mix. The ones that are up front are these things over here on the left, like the bouncy synth, this part right here. That's very prominent. It's a very prominent part of the mix, and it's already got the volume swell and everything. I want that to be stereo. And then the chorus, these bells. I want those to be stereo as well. But everything else I can deal with in mono because it's just not that interesting. The other one I left in stereo is this pad synth, the synth pad 3 that kind of plays throughout the entire song. It's a nice bed of sound that I wanted to keep. And those are pretty much my stereo tracks. All the other synth parts, I put them in mono, and most of them I panned left and right, found a complementary track to go with them. So with everything together over here, say in this chorus, you get this. This is a great example of giving you a lot of options to mix with and a pretty cool production. I don't know if I would have included all of these, but listen to what happens when you take them away. We'll start the playback and I'll mute all these little synth parts and listen to how it kind of the mix goes a little dead. They fill in a really important part, both in this frequency spectrum and just giving you something interesting to listen to, and then some sort of an effect as well. Okay. While we're talking about keys, I want to show you something I did with the strings. So you'll note when you get your tracks, there's only one string track. It's a stereo string track that pretty much plays the same thing in several places throughout the song. Okay, so this is something I use that same binaural pan on, but I used it in a different way. I used the width feature to make it even wider than normal. So here's what the track sounds like by itself before I used it. It's stereo, but it's not stereo enough, and it ended up getting lost and feeling very mono in the mix, which I didn't want. I've got everything I want in mono. I wanted this to be nice and stereo because it's strings and it comes in a couple of quieter sections of the song. So I applied this to it and listen to how much wider it sounds. And so it's a little thinner, which is fine because we want it to just cut through. We don't need it to be super, super thick. And then I used, on strings, you've seen me do this before, I like to boost the highs on strings. It just adds some air to them that makes it sound a lot better. So instead of this, so between the high frequency boost and that spreading, widening plugin, I was able to get them to cut through the mix a lot better, as you can hear here.
A last laugh, we fall back, following the leaf, float across a glowing.
Okay, so for the two verses where they play, that's perfect. We don't need them to be thick. We don't need them to have a lot of low end. That's perfect. But then we get to this part of the song, this kind of breakdown after the chorus or after the verse, where what is it? 4 bars of music, and one of the big parts of that is these strings as they come in. So the strings are carrying the whole song. There's little percussion, there's the little bell parts, but there's nothing holding down the rhythm and playing the chords of the song in this section. And it felt a little thin to me. There's no bass being played, and there's just not a lot of low end in these strings. I tried to go boost the low end. It didn't really do much for me. So what I did is I duplicated this track, completely duplicated it, as in completely duplicated the whole track in all the regions. Okay? And that's what this strings 2 is right here. Now, for the rest of the song, I muted them. These grayed out regions are muted. But I wanted it in this one section to fill out the sound. So what did I do? Duplicating it doesn't do anything but add volume, right? Well, I did do something that you've seen me maybe do before. I took this region and I came over here and I transposed it down an octave. Okay? So I took it down an octave so that it's now playing an octave below the original strings. So without any plugins, this is what that sounds like. So right out of the gate, we're getting a complete extra octave of low frequencies to mess with. But it's got a lot of extraneous noise. I really just want it for the thickness. So 2 things I did. First, I added the binaural plugin and set it to mono. I don't need any width out of this. I've already got great width. Any width here would just kind of confuse the matter. So I set it to mono, which sounds like this. Okay, and then I wanted to focus in on those low frequencies. So I used this EQ to just roll off the highs and get rid of any of the sound of the bow on the fret and just have a nice thick low end. And this is what I came up with. Really boosted the lows and just kind of shelved off everything and notched out certain frequencies that were kind of sticking out and not giving me that warm sound. So then blend that with the original strings and you get this. So that's the original string right there. Doesn't sound bad, but there's just not a lot of low end. And you may say, Joe, you rolled off the low end. Not really. I just rolled off just a tiny bit. There's just not much there. I need it to be, there's a lot of high end and there's just not a lot in the low end. I tried a boost, it just didn't do the trick for me. So I duplicated it, took it down an octave, and it went from this to this. So now that whole section of the song has a lot fuller sound to it without me having to add anything else. I didn't create new parts. I just added in some low end to those strings. So that's about it for, let me just check my notes here, for the strings and for the keys. I did all that stuff. Okay, so let me show you something along the lines of, oh, this is actually interesting. This is kind of a sidetrack. I preach a lot about using a reference track when mixing, but I don't do it a lot myself. I don't practice what I preach very much, and I'm, shame on me. I need to do it more because it helps you stay grounded and kind of keep track of what's going on. So when I first listened to this song, it reminded me of a Coldplay song. I don't know if you've heard this one called "Hurts Like Heaven," and just the drum beat and kind of the vibe. It's different because there's no electric guitars in our mix, and obviously there's electric guitars in Coldplay's, but it just had this vibe that stuck with me. So here's that song. So you can see there's a lot of synth stuff going on. There's a similar drum beat, and it works a lot better. It works as a reference. Sorry, I thought I heard my kid walk in the room. Hang on, let me pause the video. Okay, I'm back. My 3-year-old was knocking on the studio door. He wanted a puzzle. Okay, so we're back. Okay, so anyway, so use this song, Hurts Like Heaven. And then I would just flip back and forth. I had that playing through another channel on my mixer, and then as I'm mixing, I can just flip over and compare. And it helped me kind of get the overall tone and kind of let the vocals sit better and kind of figure out where the low end's going to be. Those are the main things that I did it for. But I could do something like this. I'm listening to the chorus. Now, it's not a life-changing thing. Obviously, the Coldplay one has been mastered and squashed like crazy. It just sounds very squash, but I could get kind of the overall balance and level. That's kind of what I use references for. It's just the overall vibe. Want to make sure that's working. Okay, here's the cool thing I did on the choruses. Now, this video, I know I'm going to be jumping around quite a bit, but I've just got a lot of cool things I want to show you. And if you've been a member for a while, you've seen how I do a lot of things. So I don't want to make this a repetitive, oh, here's how I EQ the acoustic guitar. You've seen that, and I can, you can see my EQ settings mostly around here. Nothing big there. It's not that challenging. But there are some things that were really challenging in this song. And this is actually a tip that I picked up from one of my subscribers that is very cool. I'm going to start doing this a lot more. It kind of goes along with some of the stuff Graham was doing with automation in last month's video, where he would automate certain drum fills up a few dB, and even though it would clip the bus, it would just bring the drums out in that section, and it worked well. This is something I was listening to a mix from a subscriber. He might have been one of my VIP members, I can't remember. And when the chorus came in, it just hit really hard. And it was kind of a hip hop sort of deal, so it was. It's similar to this as far as like spoken word vocals and stuff. But when it came in, the chorus hit really hard, and I emailed him back and said, "Hey man, that chorus hits really hard." And he said, "Oh yeah, here's what I did. I just took all the tracks, all the regions, and cut them up. And on the chorus sections, I just bumped them up 3 dB. And I thought, that's brilliant. It's not a huge difference, but it's enough to lift the energy of the song quite a bit to where it really had an impact on the mix. So I decided to do that on this song. So you'll see, if you look on the tracks here, I cut up all the tracks. Let me look at something here. Okay, so you can see kind of, I'll zoom in so you can see, but every track, I just selected everything and found the chorus, and I just used my cut tool to cut them. So I cut the beginning of the chorus, and then right at the end of the chorus where it goes into that down section again. And then I just selected all these regions, and I came back over here to this nifty little section over here, and you can see here, I just increased the gain by 3 dB. So that when it goes from here in the verse and hits that chorus, it just automatically, everything jumps up 3 dB. Now, this is on the audio track level, so it's feeding into compressors and things like that. So it's not a full 3 dB jump in most cases. It's just the individual tracks are being turned up a little bit, which may just cause more compression, but it just causes an overall lift in the track. And listen to how it works. We'll go into that, go into this first chorus.
Dream.
Now that's the spirit. Go get 'em, Tiger.
So it doesn't sound forced. You wouldn't have noticed it was there. You would have just thought, okay, we're at the chorus. Now, a lot of instruments come in there as well, but prior to doing this, the song really didn't grab me when the chorus came in. Even though there's so many tracks, it just didn't do it for me. Does that make sense? When the chorus would come in, I still would feel like there's just not a lot going on. And by doing this and by taking all these tracks, I'm going to show you real quick. Give me just the middle part. I don't know if it's going to let me. You know what? I was going to show you before and after. It's going to take too long. I don't want to do it here. But literally just selected all the tracks and cut them, and then selected them all here and boosted them up a little bit. And it gave me that lift that just really kicks into the chorus. So even though there's more instruments that come in at the chorus, when the chorus came in, I was always disappointed. And it wasn't so much an EQ thing or a compression thing or even a limiter thing. It was just, it didn't have that same lift. And so I could have automated each individual track to go up, or the buses or something like that. And I actually, first thing I tried was automating the master fader to go up and down. I had these 3 dB automations going on, which anyway, it's not doing it now. I just had it written in here as automation to go up and down throughout the song, but I decided that sounded too obvious. It would jump up 3 dB the entire mix. For some reason, doing the individual tracks up 3 dB actually made it have that exact lift that I wanted, that just automating the master fader did not. Okay, so let's listen to that again. Coming into this last chorus, it's the same sort of thing. You'll just hear everything just lift a little bit. It just goes up another level, and it just worked so well. So this doesn't work for all music, and I wouldn't do this every single time, but man, it worked really well in this song. Okay, so one thing I did on the vocals at the end that I want to point out is, first of all, I didn't use all the vocals that were provided. I felt like there was at least one too many of these harmony vocals, specifically with Travis's vocals. and I didn't feel like I needed all of those. So all I have is the lead vocal, the backing vocal, and then 2 harmonies. So 2 harmonies in stereo and the first 2 in mono, panned in the center. And then one thing, for some reason, I don't know if this was a mistake on their part, but for some reason, these last 2 choruses were different. If you listen to his vocal.
I don't have to know where I'm going now, following the road.
So the way it was done before, the second chorus here,
I don't have to know.
didn't have this part. The I don't have to know, that wasn't there. It was just all the octave with a tiny, quiet little back vocal here. So here's the backing vocal was singing that part.
Following the road.
But it was the only one. And then this part was singing.
I don't have to know.
So it went from 2 people singing kind of that melody part and 2 harmonies to 3 harmonies and 1 melody. And it was unbalanced. It sounded like this.
I don't have to know where I'm going now.
Versus this.
I don't have to know.
And I feel like because she's singing that same melody, that I don't have to know, it needs to be there in every chorus. So I don't know if that was a mistake or not, but all I did was I took this one and just duplicated it and copied it over here. So now you have him singing that part in both sections.
I don't have to know.
Because I would get to that last chorus and it would feel like something was wrong, and I would turn up this vocal, not realizing that these 2 weren't the same thing like they were here and in the previous chorus. So that's a quick edit you might want to do. Otherwise, it sounds weird in that last chorus. It's almost like the melody disappears and you just have harmony, and you never just want harmony. Speaking of vocals, let me show you real quickly how I mixed the vocals here. Ran all the vocals through my vocal bus for each of the singers. So what were the names? Scott, Travis, and Katie. So Scott's the spoken word, the rapper, and then Travis and Katie. So for Travis and Katie, I was having some issues. First thing, on all of them, I ended up using a de-esser. I put in compression and EQ, and then after that, when I wanted a nice bright vocal, the S's were too much. So I used a Waves de-esser plugin. I always put it at the beginning of the chain, and just have it chopping off the S's, which you can hear here.
I don't have to know.
So without it, you hear those S's and T's really cut your ear off.
I don't have to know.
That T and 2 just really comes through too much. But with the de-esser and then using this kind of high boost that we use to give it a nice airy sound, it sounds really nice and present and breathy without being harsh.
I don't have to know.
Okay? So that's one thing I did on the vocal that took me some time. As far as compression, pretty basic vocal compression stuff, nothing crazy. But I was feeling like I didn't have enough space on this vocal. So I added an analog delay to both vocals. So I just put this right on the vocal track. It was towards the end of the mix. I just wanted to add it in there. And essentially set up an analog slapback delay. So set it to an 1/8 note delay time. Mix was at about 30% with no feedback, and rolled off the highs and the lows, so it's pretty lo-fi sounding. So then it ends up sounding like this.
I don't have to know.
So before, it was this, without the delay. Oops, without the delay here.
I don't have to know where I'm going now.
And it was okay, but I felt like it wasn't everything else. The background vocals especially had some space to them, and I wanted the vocal to have a little more space. But reverb wasn't the answer. I tried it. It didn't really work. So I add this little simple slapback delay, and
I don't have to know where I'm going now.
same thing for Katie's vocals.
I don't have to know where I'm going now. Following the road, wherever you bound, all I need is you.
So for their vocals, I wanted her vocal to just be nice and bright and pretty thin, because I wanted to sit on top of everything else. And then his vocal, I treated a lot of the same way. I boosted the highs to really get it to cut through. It was too dull without it. Boosted the highs, used a de-esser, and it worked pretty nicely. But I also wanted his warmth to come through. So like her EQ, I didn't do a lot down here because it was recorded fairly thin. But with his EQ, it was thick down here, so I tried to just use some low-mid cuts to get rid of some of the thickness, but not too much. I wanted it to be warm without being muddy. And I think I landed on something pretty cool, because now they sound pretty good together.
I don't have to know where I'm going now. Following the road, wherever you bound.
Okay, so that's the vocals there. And I'll get to the whoa vocals in a minute because they're pretty cool. There's a couple things I want to show you there. On the rap vocal, did something pretty cool here. There's some really cool parts that they recorded. Like the singing, the accent parts on the doubles, which is great. And then the singing parts where he's singing the rap underneath is so cool. So you've got all of that going on here.
Pocketing the light and I'm keeping it from drifting. And even though I'm knowing better, I'll be wishing that every day.
So I don't know if you're a fan of rap at all, but rap, if a good rapper is so talented. The fact that he can do this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 takes of the rap, 3 spoken word, and then 4 singing, and it's just all dead on. I don't know if they did a lot of editing or not. I'm guessing they didn't, and he just nailed it. But you've got all this going on at once.
Pocketing the light and I'm keeping it from drifting. And even though I'm knowing better, I'll be wishing that every day.
So it's brilliant to have these these sung parts down here, because without them, you just have just a rap.
Pocketing the light and I'm keeping it from drifting. And even though I'm knowing better, I'll be wishing that every.
And that's not bad. I mean, there's plenty of songs out there that do that. But by adding in these singing parts, it just adds a whole new dimension. And being stereo, it's very cool because whenever he's singing, it's a pretty sparse arrangement, so you have room to have that stereo come in. So here's on the high part. It was a little thick, so I cut out a little mid-range, but that's all I did to that one. Aside from the basic, again, I've got this routed through this bus over here with a de-esser, EQ, and compression, just normal vocal chain stuff. But for the low part, so here's the high part.
Pocketing the light and I'm keeping it from drifting.
So just wanted to have the same basic tone as him, as the rap part. But here for the low part, it sounds like this by itself.
Pocketing the light and I'm keeping it from drifting. And even though I'm knowing better, I'll be wishing.
And it kind of, I think they probably tuned it because it has a little bit of auto-tune sound to it, but I wanted it to sound more robotic. So I did a couple things. First off, I added an EQ, and I didn't want it to be deep. I wanted to hear the lows, but without being muddy, so I did this.
Pocketing the light and I'm keeping it from drifting.
Okay, the way he's singing and that EQ sounds a little more robotic. Then I used that binaural pan button to make it even wider, just as wide as possible.
Pocketing the light and I'm keeping it from drifting.
Kind of makes it sound a little out of phase, which is totally fine. And the final thing I did was I brought in this amplifier. This is a plugin that comes with Studio One. It's just a basic guitar amp and stomp box emulator. So what I did is I took off the amp and the speaker and just left the stomp box as if I'm running this vocal through a pedal board. And then there's this one pedal. I don't even know what this is, honestly. I need to look in the manual. But it's some sort of kind of a fast, modulated, weird thing that I've used on background vocals one other time, actually this past week, and it worked really well. So here's the vocal, and then when I turn this effect on, listen to what happens to it.
Pocketing the light and I'm keeping it from drifting. And even though I'm knowing better, I'll be wishing.
So it's really fast. It's not a tremolo, but it's almost like some sort of a left to right. I don't know exactly what it is, but if you listen to it at slower speed.
Pocketing the light and I'm keeping it from drifting. And even though I'm knowing better,
So it's kind of an auto pan. Okay, that's a P, pan. I thought it said man. It didn't make sense. So it's an auto pan type deal to get kind of a Leslie speaker sound. So if you go, an eighth note or so, you get something like this.
Pocketing the light and I'm keeping it from drifting.
And that's cool, but I didn't want that. I wanted it to sound robotic. So I went for 1/64th note, and you end up with this weird sound.
Pocketing the light and I'm keeping it from drifting. And even though I'm knowing better, I'll be wishing that every day, every dog day, every last sight.
It almost adds an extra octave below the way it sounds, which is super cool. So then you blend it in with it. Now by itself, it's creepy and you think, Joe, you've lost it. But listen to it blended in with everything else.
Pocketing the light and I'm keeping it from drifting. And even though I'm knowing better, I'll be wishing that every day, every dog day, every last sight is a time that'll last for life, yo. And I don't mind if you stop by when you got time.
So when I bypass it, it just sounds like somebody singing, which is fine.
Pocketing the light and I'm keeping it from drifting.
But there's so much more going on, you can't hear it as well. And if you turn it up, it doesn't sound right either. So by doing this, it just grabs your ear just a little tiny bit in sections.
Pocketing the light and I'm keeping it from drifting. And even though I'm knowing better,
and even in the full mix, you still hear it in places.
Pocketing the light and I'm keeping it from drifting. And even though I'm knowing better, I'll be wishing that every day, every dog day, every last sight is a time that'll last for life, yo. And I don't mind if you stop by when you got time, and I'll take you on a ride through a rainbow sky.
Okay, so that was a lot of fun. That was one of those, I think Mixer Man calls them science experiments, where you spend some time really just dialing in a weird sound. And I know you can go overboard with that, and maybe you think I do that sometimes. Maybe you think that's overboard. I don't think so. I think it's a cool part, and I wanted to really get it to stick out. I did this with some regular background vocals, not that fast of a auto pan thing, but it ended up sounding pretty stinking cool. In fact, I'm going to show you. This is not planned. Hang on. This is for a client. It's not even released yet, so don't tell him. So I did it to, I had a lead vocal and 2 doubled vocals panned out. So I did that effect and also a tremolo that was doing the same timing, and sounded like, hang on, sounded like this.
Because you only need a light when it's burning low. Only need a sound when it starts slow.
So that's the effect.
Only know you love it when you let it go.
And then blended together, it sounds like this together.
Only know you've been high when you're feeling low. Only hate the road when you're missing home.
So anyway, I thought that was kind of cool. Neat little effect that I stumbled across and used it in Dueling mixes. So if you have plugins that do guitar amp simulations, especially guitar effects, go for it, because it's a super fun thing to mess around with, and you can find some pretty useful stuff. Okay, so last couple of things, unique things that I did on this mix. I did do some muting. So there are parts that I got rid of entirely. For example, whatever this water and air tracks that are here, I don't know if you've listened to these, but they're really quiet, so I have to turn up the view just to see them. But the water one sounds like this. Okay. And then the air one sounds like this. And I tried to work them in because I'm thinking that's something creative they wanted in the mix. I couldn't get it to even be audible. And once it was audible, it sounded weird. So I just left it alone. So the only effect I'm using that they sent me is this reverse deal right here. That's it. So sorry, I couldn't do that. Muted a few vocals like I told you, and then the acoustic guitar, I got rid of 2 entire parts. So the very intro, I left the 2 main guitars panned left and right to play the intro, because that makes sense. Let's go to the beginning here. Okay, that's pretty standard. You'd want those left and right. But then the original way he has it written has 4 guitars playing here, which I just thought was too much. It's 4 acoustic guitars in a pretty dense mix. So I got rid of 2 of them. So I got rid of, used 1 of each. So the first one is panned left, the other one's panned right, and you end up with this. It's so much cleaner than this. So I left the picking in there because that was kind of cool stereo, and then I added a neat delay to this little high picking part over here. With a quarter note, and boosted the highs a little bit just to get it to stand out, because it wasn't cutting through, but it was a cool part. So it works like this.
Fighting to the finish of the last warm breeze. On knees in the tall grass and green trees. If you need me, you can find me in the longest beam. When afternoon to sum up every dream.
Okay, so those are the things I muted with the acoustic guitar. I think it makes a big impact and keeps it from being crazy. I also muted the claps. They were not working for me. I tried everything. I couldn't get them to sound good in the mix. And the mix has such good percussion and shaker and tambourine and drums. I just didn't think it was necessary, so I nixed it. And I'm glad I did. It just wasn't working. I did give it a shot, but I just couldn't. It had that weird resonance of either the room or the reverb they used that it just wasn't really cutting the mustard for me. Okay, and the final thing I want to show you this is the last thing, and it's very cool. I used a lot of automation on these whoa tracks. So the Travis and Katie, when they're singing that whoa, oh, that part was something that took me a long time to get right, but once I did, I really liked what I was doing. So here's the sound that I got of them. This is them by themselves. Okay, so that sound you're hearing is the delay, some automation that I have going on. We'll get to that in a second. But first, let's go over here. It'll be easier. Here's what I did. So here's the plugins that I used. First, I used EQ. I didn't want it to be a lot of low frequency. I want it to be high, but not too bright. So just cut off the lows and the mid range a little bit to get them a little more even. And then I use compression because for Katie especially, she would sing, whoa, oh, and that high note would get lost. She just wouldn't sing it. It was very quiet. So I could have gone in and automated each of those notes to come up, but instead I wanted to use compression in a way that would compress all the notes but that one, so that one comes up. And so by using compression like that, I was able to get those notes louder. So listen to, here's without compression and without the other effects too. Hear how whoa, oh, that 1, 2, 3, 4, that fourth note, the high note, she disappears entirely. And I thought it was muted, like they had cut it out, but she sings it so quietly. So I use compression to compress the first 3 notes, and then it lets off for that fourth one, so you hear it come through a little bit better. Just a little bit. It doesn't work perfectly, but it was enough to make me happy, and so I moved on. So a lot of compression there to get it nice and tight sounding. And then I used this Ampire plugin again with just the stomp boxes to do a couple things. Used an EQ once I got the tone dialed in with the delay and reverb. But I used delay and reverb here. Just set up basic delay. It was a dotted quarter note delay, and then a reverb, a pretty big sounding reverb. And together they sounded great together. So the bulk of the sound that you hear is the reverb, but that delay gives it an extra an extra tap of delay that kind of makes it a little more interesting in the mix. So that's my sound. Now, what I realized was one thing I wanted to do is that breakdown after the first chorus, I wanted to turn up the feedback on the delay and have it repeat rhythmically. So I automated a bunch of stuff here, and I don't have time to go into a ton of it. I don't want to waste a bunch of your time. But I automated the delay length itself to go from dotted quarter note to half note here for those last couple of lines. And then I automated the feedback up all the way. Okay, so you can see these lines here are the automation. Feedback turns up all the way through the chorus. And then I automated the mix knob, which is essentially volume. It turns down the delay and leaves the direct signal. Since there's no direct signal here, it's essentially acting as a volume. So you see the volume automation, it turns it down, then turns it back up coming into the verse, and then way down. And then it's quiet, and then as it builds into that final chorus, it comes back up and those delay repeats keep coming in. Now, I wanted to make it really prominent in the mix, but I knew that was a bad idea. So I turned it down and kept it subtle, but it's still there, and it adds something interesting to a fairly sparse section of the song. So let's listen to it all the way through, and you can see the automation happening. I'll actually even pull the plugin up so you can see that too. And you'll see it happening as it gets over to this chorus. It introduces that repeating O part again, which is pretty cool. So take a listen. You know what? Let's listen to the whole mix.
We catch a last laugh, we fall back, following the leaf, float across a glowing sea, and I'll rewind it back, play it over in my mind. If I time it right, then we can make it last a lifetime. So fade away.
So it automated up to kind of swell into that verse and then slowly fade it out, and then now it's going to come back in slowly. So since I changed it to a half note delay for that section, it's this whoa, oh, whoa, oh, whoa, oh, whoa, oh, whoa, oh, whoa, oh. And it's just a cool part that adds in something a little interesting that uses a part that they recorded already and just turns it into kind of a synth part for that little down section, because there's just not much happening to fill out that section. And I did it, and I thought it sounded pretty cool. And then the rest of the song is just static as it is throughout the rest of the song, the basic settings that I played for you before. But that one section is where I used a bunch of automation to get something pretty cool. Okay, all right, so that wraps up this video. That's my mix. Really kind of happy with how this thing turned out. I wasn't sure what was going to happen in this mix, but I like it. So make sure you make time to do your own mix. Make sure you vote for my mix because it's awesome. And when you talk to Graham, just tell him, your day is done. enter the Joe era. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, so why don't I play you for a little outro music? You can hear the final couple bars of the song with that final chorus and everything together just rocking out. Thanks again for being a Dueling Mixes member. Really appreciate it. Hope this is insanely valuable for you. And we'll see you on the webinar later this month.
I don't have to know